There's money in them there bricks. This is the focus group.
They're all business, except when they're not. It's the Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash.
Welcome to the Focus Group. John Nash here with my good friend and co-host Tim Bennett. FocusGroupRadio.com is our website. If you visit it, you'll learn all about us, and you'll learn about TFG Unbuttoned, our companion podcast, The Focus Group, which drops on Tuesdays. This show is available on video Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube and Facebook Live. And then the audio version of this drops on Saturdays in honor of our SiriusXM out days when we were on OutQ. And most of our listeners are used to hearing us on Saturdays, which is kind of still a cool thing. We want to thank our partner here on the Focus Group, Deep Discount. You can get there by going to focusgroupradio.com and clicking on their shark logo and start shopping away. Mr. Bennett, we are indeed, as we said in Unbuttoned early in the week, in the dog days of summer, but I have a report for you.
Uh-oh.
Tim supplied to me his grandmother's recipe for, and we laughed about this last week, lime key pie.
Key pie. Just key lime pie.
Lime key pie. All right, I'm just going to tell you this. You are 100% right about this pie. It's fantastic. I made it on Saturday afternoon, and I couldn't be happier with the way it came out. Now, this is the part. So the recipe is basically a simple recipe, and the trick is, in my opinion, how many limes you choose to use, how much lime juice you want to squeeze. So in Tim's recipe, he said you could start with 3, depending on the size of the lime and how tart you might want the pie. I ended up going with 4 limes, but after it sits in the fridge for a while, I think the flavor infuses into the rest of the ingredients, and it might not be as sharp. So I think next time I might even do an extra lime.
Did you do the lime zest? Did you spread that on there at all?
I did not. This was a test run. But of course, guess who said something when they were having the pie? Bob was like, you know what you could have done? You could have done a zest on this. I said, yeah, no, Tim's got that in the recipe already.
Now, did you do the shortbread or you did the graham cracker?
Okay. Diamond makes a pecan pie crust. So I bought pecan pie.
Oh,
so
see,
again,
I wouldn't have done that.
You go. And Bob would agree with you because Bob's like, you could have done a zest. I'm like, how do I do a zest? He goes, you just take a grater. And I'm like, oh, yeah. And I reread Tim's recipe, says you could do this. Then after the second helping of pie, after a different meal, Bob said, I think the graham cracker crust might be...
Yeah. Well, you can't go off the reservation. You got to stay on.
That was my point. Whatever, if Tim posts this or you make this pie, just follow what he says.
Did you do the food coloring?
No, I did not, but we now want to do food coloring as well because
which is about the color of my shirt. If you're watching today, is what it will turn out. Yeah, so
yours
was more of a yellow-ish, probably.
Yes,
or
exactly.
Off-white.
Off-white, and we were watching when we ate the pie. We were watching something called Cook Country on PBS, and they were making ice cream in a blender. And this woman was making pistachio something ice cream. And she took like 1/8 of a teaspoon of food coloring. And she said, because I think if it's going to be, it was peppermint flavor or something. She goes, I think if I'm making something that's supposed to be mint, it should be green. And that's
Did you do whipped cream?
No, we didn't put anything on top. We could have done Cool Whip or whipped cream, but Bob said no, we didn't need to do that. But he did. That was the last straw. Did you do the zest? You should use a graham cracker crust. And then finally, next time you might want to put green food coloring. So I know I have a bit of a shopping list.
And next time, do 2 of them and do a lemon one. Do a taste test. Do a lemon pie.
Would you do the same thing for
same exact thing?
Squeezing a lemon? Okay.
Yeah, same exact thing, same exact recipe. The lemon pie, I use the shortbread crust instead of the graham cracker.
Okay, lemon shortbread, key lime, graham cracker. I want to make this pie
my mom.
It's
just lemon. So not the lime part, but just make a lemon pie and make the key lime pie or the lime key pie.
Lime key pie.
And then
I want to make this for my mom, but this is a lactose recipe. So I went online and I found perfect substitutes for everything. There's actually a lactose-free cream cheese. And they recommended doing sweetened oat milk or something, but I might make it for him. But you were going to say, I'm sorry.
No. So I thought of you. I was going to send it to you. So we had talked about the brownie, the brownie bake-off, which we did weeks ago.
But you used the Aldi mix recently?
So I did the Aldi mix, and when I read the directions, I kind of cocked my head like the Planet of the Apes look, or the Japanese I used to work with. Because all it was so it's the Aldi chewy fudge mix. It's $1.55, and it comes. So you got all you do is you put a cup of oil in, 2 eggs, and I think it's 3 tablespoons of water. It was so thick, it was like taffy. I couldn't. I was trying to stir it, and I thought this isn't going to work. John, the best damn brownie I've ever had, and I don't like chocolate.
No, you're not.
I laughed and I said to Richard, I said, when John and Bob come down, I'm going to make a whole bunch of these, or we're going to make them together, or I'm going to make them and freeze them. I don't know if I could replicate. I've got to buy and try it again this week. It also had at the bottom.
Recipe. You
I
followed
the recipe. At the bottom, it got a little hard and chewy and crusty, almost caramelized. It was so good. Oh my gosh, I couldn't believe how good it was.
And this is the Aldi $1.29.
Aldi dollar. Mine was $1.55, I think. Might have been $1.23. I don't know. But I looked online. But it's just called the Chewy Fudge Brownie Mix. And then Bunky had seen it. He's a listener of our show here. He had contacted us and said, you got to try the Aldi recipe, or the Aldi box of brownie mix. So I know other people are doing these things that have gone viral. If we were in the studio, we would have them all lined up, I guess.
Yeah.
And
Did
let
you use
everyone
a glass
taste them.
pan or a metal pan?
Oh, well, in the move, things all went away. So Richard, he goes to thrift stores all the time. I said, pick me up a brownie pan. He brought back lasagna pans. He brought back a Le Creuset or something. I said, I just want an 8x8 brownie pan. Never heard of such a thing. He didn't know. So he comes back with this 13x9 pan, which he ended up going to some specialty kitchen shop at the outlets and buys this thing for $20. And of course, I was like, no, but that's all I had. But I looked on this brownie recipe box, it actually gives you all the different variations of if you have a pan this size, pan this size, pan this size, pan this. So
for cooking times,
for
right?
cooking it, right?
Yeah.
So it did have it correctly. So now it was a little bit thicker than. They were about as thick as an iPhone. So they weren't that. They were not thick as I would
the
like.
brownies were?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I did a 13x9 pan, and I had to actually really spread it out. So toward the ends, they were very thin and they got kind of crunchy. But I actually liked it. I was shocked. So I went to Home Goods over the weekend, and I bought because I've asked and asked and asked for this brownie pan that hasn't shown up, and you can make cornbread or whatever else in it. So I had to go buy a pan.
Metal?
I know they're at the thrift store, probably 50 cents, but no, I had to spend $8 to get this pan. So that's what I got.
But it was metal or glass?
Metal.
Okay, so I've had better luck with glass cookware like Pyrex for some reason
Right.
with some of the brownie mixes. So I'm going to try that. We have an Aldi up by us this weekend. I'll pick up a
Get
couple
the brownie
boxes.
mix.
Okay, I'm going to try. I'm going to check it out. And when you do back to lime key pie, let's back to the Nan's lime key pie.
Lime key pie.
How do you extract the lime juice? Do you use the simple old thing that sits on the counter, and you, or do you just use your fist and you squeeze the lime?
At my mom's, when we go up for holidays, we just have the cutting board and a steak knife, and I cut it and I squeeze it.
That's what I did on Saturday. Personally, I didn't use any.
And then sometimes I'll take a spoon and I'll go in and to get the pulp, because
Yes.
I will put some of the pulp in to give it a little more tart.
I'm glad
And
you
break
brought
the
that up.
juice.
I was going to ask you about that because that would add a little texture, right?
Right. But then what did make the move, and then somebody found is a juicer. So we have one of those old-fashioned juicers that you put the citrus in, whether it's oranges or it's limes or whatever.
It's like a press, right?
This one's got it's like a butt plug, really.
Oh, it's the thing. It's a conical thing, and it
Yeah.
sits on. Yeah, okay, that's and you just
Get the
run the
seeds
thing
out,
over.
yeah.
Exactly. Okay.
Which is far quicker than just squeezing it with your hands, but
My hand got tired after a while because they were refrigerated limes, and I realized had I let them sit out for a while, they would have gotten softer, and it would have been much easier to get the stuff.
Well, you
out.
just put the lime in a microwave for 20 seconds, and then it's all fine.
Oh, here we go. And the only other question I was going to ask, it just flew my mind now. When I mixed this, I decided to mix the primary ingredients before I put the lime juice in. I started mixing it, and then I poured the lime juice in, and then I continued mixing. Do you put everything in at once in the start?
Do it all at one time, and you have to use the electric mixer with your hand.
I had to look. Yep, that was
and
great.
Get it nice and fluffy. You don't think it's enough.
I thought it was too much when I was pouring it into the pie.
Oh, you did? Okay.
But it went right up to the top, and I was able to spread it out.
I'll post the recipe because people are probably asking. We'll ask for it, but very simple recipe.
Put it online. Yes, it is one of the. This is also a recipe that shows up in other places. And then they use substitutions. They do something.
And people use egg whites. People put egg whites in it. I don't know why raw egg whites. I don't know why.
This is what you did is perfect. Today on my shopping list, I have a few things I need to get because this pie is going to be made again and again. Oh, and then Bob cynically says to me, he goes, "Oh, a refrigerator pie. I love refrigerator pie."
That's smart ass.
He loved it, though. He loved it.
If you go to Trader Joe's, you could really fancy it up. They sometimes, depending upon the season, whether they're orange, lemons, or limes, they will have the dried fruit.
Okay.
And you could stick one of those in the top of it, really fancy it up, a little
garnish kind of thing.
A little garnish, yeah. Yeah.
If you're just tuning into the show, you might think it's a cooking show.
Cooking show, exactly.
Cooking with Tim and John, but it's the focus group, and we usually do exactly what we just did: catch up and banter. Then we have a segment called Caught Our Eye. We bring news stories to each other's attention that we might not. We usually rarely cross over on that one, and then we follow that up with a business birthday. And today we're going to follow that or end the show with an interesting shop talk about a woman who grew up in a family whose dad was gay, married to his mother. And she discovered the mother was aware of this and loved the father. But there's some things about the article that are interesting as she revealed this to people that Tim and I want to talk about. So, Mr. Bennett, without further ado, what caught your eye?
What caught your eye? Here's what Tim and John found.
Just as a quick sidebar, did I mention on the last week's show that when we had Mark Pipkin on from the $2 bill that somebody recognized him at his country club? So one of our listeners, Jonas, recognized him. So funny as it would be, I'm reading the newspaper about this one kind of avant-garde lifeguard that is down here, is older, in his 50s lifeguard, that insists on going to the bank and cashing his check and getting twos. And so I got to find out what bank it is down here because they're stocked with twos to give him his paycheck and $2 bills.
Clearly, if they could do the paycheck, they have enough to give you and me, right?
Right, yeah. Yep. So we'll check on that. So my story this week is a simple one, but I was surprised about it, not for the headline as much as what was included in the story. So the headline is, "A man says Tesla won't let him sell his Cybertruck even though it's too big for his parking spot." So those big angular trucks that look like something out of Star Wars, if you're watching, John's got it up on the video. These Tesla Cybertrucks, when they first were announced, people went crazy over them, wanted to buy them. Looks like something out of Mad Max or something, right, John?
Yeah, actually, Tim, that's right in the zone. Mad Max and Thunderdome, yeah.
And so it's an electric EV from your friends at Tesla. And this article was in the Business Insider, according to the owner is a guy named Blaine Radin. And he had pre-ordered one of these Cybertrucks and was very excited to get it. He lived in the suburbs, but as the 8 or 9 month wait had taken to get the truck, he was ended up getting separated from his wife and having to move into an apartment. So leaving the suburbs and the house and the driveway, he moves into an apartment in a more urban area and has this huge Cybertruck now that doesn't fit into the parking spots that he has in the parking garage at the apartment and doesn't know what to do with this huge truck now. It's really not practical for him. They did say it's as big or bigger than most of the trucks on the market right now, and in some cases maybe wider or a tad longer. And so it's 224 inches long and 95 inches wide, which if you've seen one of these things, they are big. So what I thought was interesting, though, Tesla, when you buy one of these, and this is what I thought was interesting, he called the dealer and said he wanted to turn it in or wanted to get rid of it, and he had to give them a reason why. So he called the dealer and said, I reached out to my Tesla dealership where I'd picked up the EV, and I discussed returning the car to them. The next day, the manager called and said that he did not feel my situation warranted an unforeseen circumstance, in quotes, that would trigger Tesla's purchase back of the pickup. They also informed him that he could not sell the EV for a year without violating the Tesla Motor Vehicle Order Agreement, which says there's a provision in there that if you buy a Cybertruck, you must keep it for a year. If you sell the truck during the first year, you will be fined $50,000 or the value of the vehicle, whichever is greater, and be banned from buying any Tesla products in the future. So he's figuring now he can't turn it in. The dealer won't buy it back. He has trouble parking. He's trying to figure out if he could park it on the street in the city where he lives, but is not so sure. But I thought I couldn't imagine how this was legal. That I guess when he bought this truck, the agreement was you can't resell it in a year. You have to keep it for a year. You're not allowed to resell it. If you do, you'll be fined. I was trying to figure out how they would even know. I guess maybe they keep track of these things pretty thoroughly.
The VIN number, maybe, but
yeah, maybe you're right.
Tim, I have look, Tim and I have been around the auto industry for most of our careers, and I have never and ever heard of this. I mean, for starters, the manufacturer usually is somewhat disconnected from the dealership. Yeah. They make the car, the dealer does or does not have to sell that particular model, whatever. This is different, but he would have had to have known that caveat going in, right?
Yeah, well, that's what they said to him. So he went. So he decided he would think he would get the attention of Mr. Musk, who owns Tesla and also X or Twitter. So he went on there and posted directly to him at Tesla, at Elon Musk. I'm shocked. I took delivery of my Cybertruck. It does not fit in my apartment. It does not fit in the parking space in my apartment. I immediately asked Tesla to give me authorization to sell it. They said, no, I can't keep it. I don't know what I'm going to do. I can't sell it, and they won't buy it back. I need help. They haven't responded to him.
Wow.
Someone said he may get a lawyer, but wasn't so sure. But I guess he signed this agreement that he would keep it for a year. You're not allowed to sell it for a year.
So in that case, Tim, I think if he signed that and they hold him to it, then he would be wasting his money going after a legal claim here. But what a weird thing. I mean, it must be the nature of the business that they have to do that or something. But
he's going to have to park it on the street.
Even so, I don't understand why you would force a customer to keep something for a year. I don't get it's a bad PR look when stuff like this happens, right?
Unless they were just trying to make it so that people weren't buying them and then reselling them. Because they were rare. It was funny when you showed the picture of that truck. I wondered. I still wonder when I see them. Where are the headlights? I mean, that little strip can't be enough.
That
right?
grill thing in the front. I can't imagine
that opens. Maybe.
Where would it go? Right? Like
I don't know.
It doesn't swing down or swing up. I've been puzzling about that. I'll have to look online to see where the headlights are.
Have you seen one in the wild yet? Have you seen them on the streets?
No.
Wait,
I've seen a lot of Tesla models, like the first 2 or 3 models.
Yeah,
a lot
of cars.
A lot of them.
But wait till you see this truck. It's shocking how big it is. It really is quite big.
Hey, this is an interesting opportunity to say something because we often get listener mail about when we talk about electric vehicles. I'll just say this. Tim and I are huge fans of the electric idea and the electric vehicles. Where we fall into a critique, and it is a critique, less a criticism, is you're selling the public something that really isn't almost ready for prime time. And we're not talking about the cars themselves. We're talking about the very infrastructure that supports your ability to use it on a certain basis. And some of our listeners have EVs and they love them, but they also know their driving habits. They know how many miles they go a week. They know the radius of their driving, and they have a place to charge. So they went in and bought these vehicles in clarity, like we know what we want to do with it and we're using it. Tim, for example, if he's going to go visit his mom, that's a 5-6 hour drive, and that could be a charge stop, right?
Yeah, I'd have to stop somewhere in North Jersey, probably, or New York area, and Westchester County, and sit for an hour or something.
And with me and Bob, we could get to our house. We probably could do a round trip with one charge.
Yeah, you'd be okay, unless you got stuck like you have 3-4 hours on the Tunein.
Yeah. And that also raises this interesting issue of our friend Gary said to us the other day, you might consider adding a charger to the house because it's going to increase the value of the property. So I began looking into it. There's a whole thing about getting that custom plug unit and how it has to hook into the electricity of the house. And
it's not cheap either, I don't think, is it?
No, you could use an extension cord, but you're going to double or triple the time it takes for the battery to charge because these special adapters and plugs allow for a faster current. So, no, we're big fans. We've driven electric vehicles. I love the torque. I love how smooth it is. And
Do Pat and Gary have an electric car?
No. And we're all in that boat where we're like, a year or two from now, if leases are up or whatever, is it a possibility? So no, we're big fans, but I just object to things like, where's the infrastructure,
right.
Which is not necessarily the car company's problems. But caught my eye is a little different. It was actually on the national news. I thought I was a little ahead of the curve when I found this article, but a Lego sting operation out in Oregon happened over the July 4th holiday, and the Oregon cops basically broke up a massive Lego thing.
Oh, my God.
So what this was there's a business out there. Here's how the newspaper that I read put it. An Oregon man's Lego business is in pieces after a holiday weekend raid by police in Eugene, Oregon. According to the Springfield Police Department's Facebook page, a 3-month investigation into organized retail theft led them to a business called Brick Builders, where it found more than 4,000 allegedly stolen and often rare Lego sets valued over $200,000. So what would happen is this store called Brick Builders would buy from vendors these really elaborate Lego sets. And if there's any fans of some of the of Lego in general, they can get up to like $1,000 a set, $600 a set, that crazy prices. Some of these Star Wars sets are insanely priced. So he would buy these sets from people that would come in to sell them and then mark them up or, sell them at full retail value. And I don't know how the police got wise to this. Well, he said, according to the cops, the thieves would sell the large and expensive sets to the employees at Brick Builders, often for a fraction of their retail price. So let's say they bring in a set that's worth $600, they'd sell it to them for like $80 or something. That store had every single thing you could ever want Lego-wise, but you would pay premium prices. And then someone says, I only stumped them on 2 pieces when I tried to finish a set, blah, blah, blah. The cops posted the haul on Facebook, posing in front of a mountain of Legos. The store's owner and one employee were charged with organized retail theft and theft 1, receiving stolen merchandise. Both charges recently had their maximum penalties in purview increased in Oregon, partly in response to fears of this exact thing happening. Probably carries a 2 or 3 year sentence if they're sentenced, or if they get the max sentence. But it's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, the owner had to know that when someone came in with a bunch of these Lego kits and was selling them for like pennies on the dollar,
right.
That he was,
So he was buying stolen merchandise, quote unquote, and then reselling it.
Yeah.
So this answer, so it's funny because I had seen a whole bunch, maybe this is where you saw it as well. I think it was on social media, it might have been TikTok. They were showing all of these smash and grabs of people stealing Lego sets. And I couldn't figure out why. I'm thinking, why would they steal? And I'll profile. It didn't look like the people that were stealing them were going to be using them for, and I thought they've got to be resold somewhere, but where are you going to sell these things? And they were going in with these huge bags and stealing these Lego sets and running out. That's all they were looking for. So this must have been the deal then. If you got, like you said, $1,000 set and you could sell it for $200 or something.
Well, yeah. If you stole it, you paid $0. If you sold it for $200 and something, you made your money back.
And and they're making $800 over on the other end. Mm-hmm. Wow.
The article did mention exactly what Tim was talking about, that there seems to be a moral panic in the U.S. lately about shoplifting in general. And what the statistics actually show are exactly what Tim said. It's this idea that people are doing retail theft to remarket the things they sell. They pop up on eBay, razor blades, things like that. So it's no longer like when Tim and I worked in retail, he was Walden Books and I was Marshall's, brand names for less. Shoplifting back then was someone wearing a shirt under a shirt. They stole a shirt. This is a very organized effort and very different in fact. So, yeah. So we had
Or you and Marianne coming in with the kids from the school and wiping out the books. Other than that.
You were very gracious about that as the kids picked up books and things and just kind of strolled to the door. Tim was always a good spirit about that.
There's always something in the hand that you wanted. Here, take this, kids.
And here's a Tim thing for you though. Like I'm a book lover, right? And so Tim used to have this thing at Walden Books where if you ripped the cover off a paperback, you sent the book back or you sent the cover back.
You just
right?
sent the cover back to get credit, and the books went in the garbage.
Yeah, the book. So one day I come up to the counter and Tim's working, and I had 2 books that I wanted to buy. And I think it was me, you and me were the only 2 people in the store. I'm not sure who else was around, but if it was anybody, it didn't.
There were probably $3.75 a book or $2.75 a book, probably at that time.
Yeah, and Tim picks them both up and he whoosh, rips the covers off. Goes, here you go. He looked at me. He goes, what's wrong? I said, well, I like the cover.
I know you wanted to buy them. Well, you could have either given me $7 or you got them for free without the cover. Knowing you though, you wanted the cover.
I did, and you see how that. See how Tim, see that dime, like that binary choice. You could have the book with the cover, or you can get it for free.
Get it for free.
I think I still have one of those paperbacks without the cover.
I found a whole bunch of them. You know, they used to do, and I would do things like they would throw away thesauruses or dictionaries or stuff like that.
Which is a shame, and they don't need a cover, right?
And so I would keep some of that stuff. And you're right, I had a few of those. I think I finally got rid of them all, only because I don't know if you've opened up some of these old paperbacks. It is like 5-point type.
Tim,
I don't know how we ever read them.
I'm so glad you brought this up. So Bob's mother turned me on to a series of books by Ellis Peters. They're detective books. They're called the Brother Cadfael Mysteries. They take place in like the Middle Ages. There are like 19 books. They're really popular. Back in the day, they were made into a PBS series. I think Derek Jacobi played Brother Cadfael. So Jean has a whole row of these, right? These paperbacks. So she goes, John, take the first 4 or 5 books. I'm not going to read them again. So I take them. The first one I opened up, the pages all fell out. The binding, it was from
all the glue.
Yeah, they're from 1981 or something, the paperbacks. So most of the pages fell out. I couldn't put them back in order. And then I noticed what Tim said. How did we read these books? There is so much
dense.
Type crammed on one page. I was like, oh my God. Even with my reading glasses on, I was like, this is hard to do. Yeah. You know, I still have was it a Strunk and White? What's the Elements of Style?
Yeah.
That was one of the ripped off cover ones. I still have that. I'll probably always have it, but that was a valuable little.
He actually went to started the communications department at my college.
The guy that wrote the Elements of Style?
Strunk and White. And so we use that all the time. That was a big thing for us to use. But but yeah, those sort of books are great because I still have to check them about grammar. Like, for instance, I was listening to Frank DeCaro over the weekend, and he had talked about the proper spelling of all right. Do you know what the proper spelling is?
I want to say it's ALRIGHT.
Well, that's how I would have thought it was as well, because that's the informal use of it. But actually, that's not proper for journalism.
ALLRIGHT?
It's 2 words, all right.
Right. Ah, okay.
But we've gotten lazy. We do all right. It's kind of like a lot, right? A lot's really a lot. It's not one word.
Like a lot of things. A-L-O-D. Okay.
So, I have a lot of, so it's a lot, not a lot. But anyway, that's our sidebar for grammar. Wake up!
On that note, it's time for the business birthday.
Everyone does celebrity birthday greetings, but the Focus Group is the only show in the universe that celebrates business birthdays.
Grammar, pies, all kinds of things, John, we're talking about today. Brownies, the now 3-point seatbelts. So, happy birthday. Born July 17th, 1920. Nils Bohlin is from Sweden. He was born July 17th, 1920 in Sweden. He was a mechanical engineer and inventor. He received his diploma in mechanical engineering in 1939. He started working for the aircraft manufacturer Saab. I don't know if many remember the Saab brand for cars. They also made airplanes, similar to Subaru, also made airplanes. So he started working with the aircraft as an aircraft designer there, and helped develop the ejection seats for airplanes. And while he was working there, he ended up going from Saab to Volvo, where he worked as a safety engineer, and he was credited with the invention of the modern 3-point safety belt, which is now a standard safety feature on all cars. So he worked on the safety belt for about a year, And he said he used a lot of this technology and a lot of the information he learned while developing the injection seats for the aircraft. And his whole point for working with Volvo on this was they were trying to figure out a way to keep drivers safe in case of a car accident. So he developed this 3-point seatbelt that we're all familiar with. And Volvo ended up doing a bunch of tests, and starting in the late 50s, 1959. And he ended up getting a patent for it, and then it ended up going into the Volvo car. And from then, of course, now it's in every single car just about built. And a lot of the studies they did, they tested what would happen if you had no seatbelt on, or what would happen if you had this 3-point seatbelt on. And so they said that initially the National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration, the U.S., when they tested it, said that they felt the belt would save about 15,000 lives per year. And when they did some of the testing with the crash test dummies, if you had no seatbelt on, you pretty much got hurt or you would die of fatal injury at just about any sort of speed beyond 30. But if you had this seatbelt, 3-point seatbelt on, the fatality rate dropped to just about zero, particularly at speeds below 60 miles per hour. So that's why in 1968, the United States Department of Transportation required 3-point seatbelts in all American cars built. I didn't realize it was 1968. For some reason, I thought it was later than that.
I did too. Was his invention, was the seatbelt exclusive to Volvo cars at the time before we adopted it as a standard?
Yes, it was. So they introduced it. So they introduced it to Volvo, and they decided to use it. And they started selling it as a safety feature, and for about 10 years. And so he won some awards. It started to get attention for what he did. And they said that Volvo initially had tested it. I'd have to find it here exactly, but over 10 years. They had tested it in 28,000 different accidents. And they were able to say that this belt really was going to do something. So that's when they then decided to introduce it to the full automotive industry. But they tested in over 28,000
crash situations.
Crashes, yeah.
The amazing thing about this invention is when we think of the modern seatbelt, it doesn't vary too much from this, does it?
No.
They've made some advances in terms of being able to move forward and back with the belt on without it catching, because it only catches when there's a fast movement. But basically, this is what we've come to know for the last several decades, right?
Right. And I remember when I saw that was 1968, I started thinking, when did they add the third stoplight or brake light that we have in the back of a car? Do you want to guess when that was?
Oh. Okay, so I want to say that was early 80s.
So it was 1986, and
okay.
in the auto industry, we used to call them a chimsel, the chimsel light, the middle light. It stood for center high-mounted stoplight. And actually, it was Elizabeth Dole, who was Secretary of Transportation, who pushed to have it put in all cars. But it actually dates back to the 70s. It was developed in the 70s by a guy named John Voevodsky. And he did a study of San Francisco taxi cabs. They wanted to see if they added this light, if it would help reduce collisions and light rear-end collisions. And so that was in the 70s, and it did. And then that's when they decided to petition and try to get that added on to all cars. So that started in the 70s, and then it wasn't until 86 that it was required. I can't imagine now not having it. It is such a huge thing.
Have you seen vehicles where people have adapted it, the back end, and they've added more brake lights?
Yeah.
I find those to be distracting, actually. There's a happy medium for me. I think we hit it with the 3, but I think when they add other things to make it even more like obvious, it distracts me somehow. I don't.
Or the ones that flutter.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the one I'm thinking of. The one it does that fast thing. Yeah.
What I do like is they've added on. Your car probably has them too. The stoplights now, where they on the rear view mirrors, when your back mirrors, that you can see the light there that it's blinking. So I think that was a good addition as well. So anyway, happy birthday to Nils Bohlin. He didn't make a lot of money off it because it was patented through Volvo, and they collected all the.
Yeah. a lot of the business birthdays you've profiled with when people work for a company and the invention happens on their watch, it's the company's property. Yeah, it's not the
You'd
same
think they'd
thing.
give him a little bit. Well, the guy at Subaru that invented the Outback, essentially, you'd have thought they'd thrown him a bone. I think he might have got $5,000 in a bonus.
As a bonus.
Save the company. But, I often wondered why not. Like, if I were head of the company, I'd give the guy would get a new car every 3 years for the rest of his life, or once a year or something. Why not?
Yeah.
Companies are cheap.
Well, you and I have some friends who work for companies who recently are being, shown the door because companies also have no loyalty. That's another matter.
I don't care. Yeah.
So our shop talk today is an article that came to us via the Huffington Post. Tim read it at a different time than I did and actually had a very interesting takeaway from it. And I agree with him. But the headline, it was written by a woman named Laura Hall. And it's about her family. And the headline reads, "My dad was gay, but married to my mom for 64 years. As she died, I overheard something I can't forget." And the article talks about how her father and mother met. This is during, right around World War II. He was denied access to the Navy. He was granted admission to the Army because she figured they thought they needed able-bodied men. Apparently, he had been caught in a sting operation or had been arrested at one point for, I don't know the charge they used, but it was dancing with another man, something like that. When he returned from the war, he married his mom to his mother, her mother's dismay. He admitted to his daughter many years later that he was gay. The mother knew, apparently, and this girl, Laura Hall, she adored her father. He taught her how to crochet, needlepoint, make paper chains out of his cigarette packs. I kind of laughed at that one. He created beautiful centerpieces for the table, whipped up fancy desserts for dinner parties.
Who knew?
Thing. He was a cool dad. There were no guns, roughhousing, hunting, or violent football games for our family. So when his mother passed, when his wife passed away, her mother, she was very close to death, and she was bedridden at the time. And her father was 88, and he came down the hallway and in a very sing-song voice said, "Rusty," because I think her nickname was Rusty. "I'm so glad you said yes." And he's referring to her agreeing to marry him. And Mom, who had been unconscious the prior 24 hours but was awake, said, she goes, "I'd do it all over again." And she said her father looked very surprised at that or stunned. Then she left him to say their goodbyes. But when she heard her mother say that, she had a whole different appreciation for this relationship. So the part that of this article, I encourage you to find the article, or Tim will probably post it to our Facebook page. The part that Tim and I talked about that was intriguing was when she began speaking about this relationship her parents had in her family publicly. The amount of pushback she would get from the audience, particularly when they were of the younger generation, really upset her and was really kind of shocking, as if they had no sense of what it was like to be gay in the 40s, 50s, 60s, as if their lived experience today in the 2000s was all that there was. And am I setting that up correctly, Tim?
No, right. He was born in 1918, so it was a very different time, over 100 years ago. And she said, as John had mentioned, she decided she was going to talk about the relationship with her mom and dad. So she'd gone to a talk in the Castro district in San Francisco. And she said, "I was surprised when I received pushback from two men in the audience. One declared my father was a traitor to the gay movement. Another accused him of being cruel to my mother for hiding his sexual orientation from her. She said I was speechless and uneasy. Ashamed might be a better word, and it hurt. I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. Had I been wrong about my dad, this man that I had known and was been wonderful and caring and loving for so long to my mom and siblings and so forth?" She really said she grappled with this and didn't know how to handle it until she saw the movie with Bradley Cooper, the Maestro, about Leonard Bernstein. So I read that and I thought, how horrible. I don't know. I looked at that and thought, and it's when I contacted you, and you had happened to call and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm reading this story out of the HuffPost." And you said, "Oh, I had seen that a couple weeks ago." And I just thought it was, I guess, horrible that I thought these young people that were listening to her story would say her father was a traitor or cruel to the mother without knowing or taking into account the historic context of when this all took place. I mean, her father got arrested for dancing in a gay bar.
Yeah.
Right? So, because he might have touched somebody while he was dancing. So we're going all the way back to there to saying, oh, your father was a traitor to the gay movement. I thought that was very harsh.
Oh, look, this spurred a whole conversation with Tim and I, and it was like, I have friends who are in their mid-30s, our friends Alex and Tyler, who are obsessed in some ways with gay history. Our lived history, what it was like. And they'll sit with rapt attention when you talk about what it was like going to your first Pride Parade in 1991, where if you happen to work on Wall Street and someone saw you at the Pride Parade, you could probably lose your job. They'd go back to, hey, I think that guy's gay. Where you spoke in code. Tim and I used to say that, like, when you entered the gay community or you came out and you were gay, it was almost like you needed a Captain Crunch decoder ring, because there was the bookstores you had to go to, you had to know where the bars were. It was almost like this secret thing, this wonderful underground world.
Down the alleys of the cities. Yeah.
And in some ways, underground is exactly what it was, because this cultural shift of acceptance happened because of Stonewall and everything else that preceded it. But all you have to do is watch the movie Paris is Burning, which is available on Criterion from our friends at Deep Discount. And you go back, and some of those older ballroom queens that would walk and do the shows would talk about their childhood and what it was like to be kicked out of the house or be treated a certain way. So I was under the impression that even if you came out today in 2024, it was still not the easiest thing to do, to sit down with your parents or your loved ones and say, here's who I am, here's my authentic self. But I guess everybody expects us to be light years ahead, right?
Yeah, and I also thought back and laughed. Stuart Elliott, many people may know from the New York Times, and he'd been on our show a number of times. And we were at an event, and he was standing there. We're all having a cocktail, and some young kid came up to you. It was going on, and I forget how you actually, but he essentially was bragging about how he's going to open up this agency. He's going to light the world on fire, reaching the gay consumer, whatever. And Stuart just looks at him and goes, you know who you're talking to? And he points to you. It's like, the reason you can hang a shingle is because of this guy, show a little respect. But it was one of these things, and the guy just looked like had no concept of, how difficult it was when you think back at what you and Dave Mulryan and Bob Wittick at the time and a few other people had done in terms of having agencies that actually reached out to just market to the gay consumer, how novel that was at the time, and how risky, quite frankly. I mean, we talked on our show this week on Unbuttoned about Ellen DeGeneres, about what she went through in 1999, 2000 with her show, about essentially being kicked off because they didn't want a lesbian lead character on a sitcom. Not that long ago.
It's funny you bring up Stuart Elliott. There's two little things that you'll appreciate. One, I'll kick off with, Tim went to meet with Stuart Elliott at the New York Times building. He was being interviewed about a campaign that involved athletic women, and Martina Navratilova was one of the lead women in this. Oh, God, yeah. And if anybody listening knows Stuart Elliott or has been interviewed by him, he has a particular form of shorthand. When he's writing his notes, it almost looks like cuneiform, something from Mesopotamia, right? And so you can't read what he's writing, but he's sitting there, and he asked Tim the question probably 10 ways to China. Like, is it because, and Tim did not deviate from she's the one of the most successful.
Oh my God, they had people from Texas on the phone listening to the interview because they were so petrified we were going to say she was a lesbian.
Yeah, but Tim's like, she's the most successful tennis player of the last century. She's an incredible athlete. She represents it. And then finally Stuart's like, you're not going to say she's gay, right?
Well, Stuart started, why are you using a lesbian for your ad campaign?
Yeah, that's
that
right.
was the first question.
That's right.
Oh, well, she's an athlete, and she's one of the greatest athletes of the 20s. I know. She's a lesbian. Why are you using a lesbian? Stuart, can I buy you a cup of coffee? You can't buy me anything.
Yeah, you can't buy me anything. No, that's right.
Tim, and then he finally got exasperated.
And he moved on.
All right. But he used to bring that up. Yeah, we'd laugh about that. But they were so petrified that was going to get in the New York Times that Martina Navratilova was a lesbian.
She's a lesbian.
Hello? I mean, anyway.
So,
but that's the time. That's when that's 1998, 99.
Well, and prior to that, like in the mid-'90s, when I first met Stuart, because our agency was rather unique in the country that we were doing specifically LGBT, or gay and lesbian creative for blue chip companies for in-book advertising, Advocate, Out, Curve, that whole thing, long before the internet really hit. Stuart used to invite people he wanted to kind of touch base with and wanted in his network to breakfast with him at the Royalton Hotel, which is always a treat. And I remember my first breakfast with Stuart at the Royalton. It was kind of a little, I was a little unnerved because Stuart Elliott was the voice of the advertising column in the New York Times. And at one point, he looks at my watch, and I was wearing the Hamilton Ventura. It was like this 1950s style watch. And he holds up his wrist. He goes, "I see we have great taste." And he had the exact same watch on, same color watch band, the whole bit. And then we just started talking from there. But he shared with me at one of those breakfasts that he was only allowed to write about LGBTQ marketing maybe 4 times a year. His editor was like, "You know what? Any more than that, and it's not an accurate representation of the population." I mean, think about that for a minute. It's a business story, and it doesn't matter how many people it represents. But since there was a perception that being gay was, 1 in 10 or whatever the number was at the time that they were batting around, you can only do these stories 3 or 4 times a year, maybe 5. I was lucky enough in many cases to be in at least one of his articles every year for a while, either quoted or talking about Subaru. But I think that, so all the way back to Laura Hall's article about her discovering her dad was gay and discovering that her mother adored the father, loved him to death, would do it all over again. For me, that changes the tenor of everything. And if I were in the Castro and I were hearing this lecture from her, and if she conveyed that the mother was completely on board and loved him, why would you accuse the father of being like a traitor to the cause? He was just trying to live his life the best he could in an environment where you could literally have your life stripped away from you just because of who you loved, right?
Couldn't have had a job. And there was a scene where there was a time where she mentioned when the mother found out that her husband was gay, where he said he would pack up and leave, never see them again, yet he would take care of them for the rest of their lives. And she said, "No, please." She ran out after him and said, "Please don't leave." And kind of the way the Laura, the author here, sums this up, or is it Lori? Or
Laura Hall, I think.
Laura Hall. Is she said, "For me, the point is that love comes in all different forms, and my parents' lives, as imperfect and unfair as they may have been, were filled with love, and thanks to them, so was mine." And so I thought that was a good way for her to put it in context, to say that, her parents were in a different time, and she says that because it wasn't perfect, and because it might not fit the narrative that today feels that it should, it doesn't mean that the story doesn't deserve to be told. And so I thought it was good. I'll post that to our Facebook page.
Yeah, it's a great story.
Tim, that came from the HuffPost. Laura
and it's a
Hall
great way to end the article. The way she grew up in a household of love, and I
however
think
that was,
whatever, however that
whatever
was given,
form that was, So hey, thanks for joining us here today on the Focus Group. Be sure to head over to focusgroupradio.com. You'll find all of our media housed there, including our podcast, which is TFG Unbuttoned, which is released every Tuesday morning. You also find Deep Discount there in the corner of the, in the side margin. So be sure to click on them and start shopping away. They're a partner of ours here on the Focus Group, and we appreciate your support of them. Remember to, particularly with all the people driving and going to destinations with the summer driving, don't text and drive, arrive alive, and we'll see you next time here on the Focus Group.
It's the Focus Group with Tim Bennett and John Nash. Accessible on all platforms. Subscribe, like, and rate us on your platform of choice. Learn more at focusgroupradio.com.
That was a stunning focus group.